What is going on, guys? We're back with more picks and predictions. This weekend, the UFC is back in the Apex for another pretty trenchy card. We got Gilbert Burns versus Michael Morales in the main event. This is the full card predictions. I'm excited to break down every single fight on this card. So without further ado, let's jump right into the picks and predictions for UFC Vegas 106. Kicking off the card, we got a banger. We got Luana Pinheiro versus Tecia Pennington. This is the absolute best fight of the year. And the odds of this fight are absolutely fucking crazy. We got Tecia Pennington at minus 400, which is insane. I'm going to go with Luana Pinheiro here, man. And yes, the odds do play a role in this pick. I'm not going to lie. I can't pick Tecia Pennington, especially when she's priced like that in this matchup. Luana Pinheiro is not like a crazy bum, and Tecia Pennington is not like a crazy demon where she should ever be minus 400 against anyone, to be honest. She's coming off a win to Carla Esparza, and that is interesting because Carla Esparza, obviously former champion, won the belt against Rose Namajunas, then lost to Wei Li Zhang. Then she lost to Tecia Pennington, and she retired after that. She was on her way out anyways. The thing with Carla Esparza, though, is that she really only is like a one-trick pony. If she gets those takedowns, she gets them, and, she got some against Tecia Pennington. And, I actually think that decision was actually pretty close. If I'm not mistaken, I thought that Esparza did win that fight, but Esparza had some control time. Tecia Pennington did struggle a little bit with that, but Tecia Pennington ended up getting up. And yeah, Carlos Esparza on the feet has nothing to offer. On the flip side, Luana Pinheiro is not bad. She's a pretty good striker. She actually wants to get the fight to the ground as well. She can mix in the takedowns, but in this case, she's not oblivious on the feet. Like, she still has some stuff for Tecia Pennington to look out for. The only thing is, Luana Pinheiro tends to slow down a little bit as the fight goes on, so that's something to watch out for. But man, she's coming off fights to, Jillian Robertson. We know how good Jillian Robertson is. She's surging right now, coming off that win against Marina Rodriguez, where she just absolutely dominated Marina Rodriguez. Prior to that, she lost to, Angela Hill. Angela Hill, we know how good Angela Hill is. She's veteran of the game, has a lot to offer in the striking department as well, Angela Hill. So, Tecia Pennington, Luana Pinheiro, I should say, did have a lot coming her way in that fight. And then prior to that, she lost to Amanda Ribas. So she's losing to really, really good fighters. Tecia Pennington is not an amazing fighter. Definitely should not be worth minus 400. Tecia Pennington, she's solid. She's really sound, but Luana Pinheiro should have all the danger on her side here. Pinheiro, if she gets this fight to the ground as well, it's going to be over. Like, not over as in she's going to find a sub, but she's going to have good control on the ground. She's going to definitely rack up a bunch of minutes if she gets this fight down. So I think that Pinheiro has more ways to win. She's going to mix up the martial arts better here. So at plus 300, I mean, sure, I'm going to take Luana Pinheiro. I cannot take Tecia Pennington, especially not at minus 400. Let's move on to the next matchup. Next up, we got Hyun Park versus Carlos Hernandez. And I'm going to go with Hyun Park to win this one. I think that the Park side has all the finishing upside in this matchup. He can get this one done by knockout or submission against Hernandez. And Hernandez realistically only has one path, and that is by decision in this matchup. The one thing is, Hernandez is a very technical striker. The issue is that I feel like he does have a little bit of pillow hands where you don't really see Carlos Hernandez hurting anyone on the feet very often. And then a Hyun Park, he's going to have more pop on the feet. I think when it comes to the volume of strikes, these guys are going to be pretty similar, so it will be pretty close, but I think Park will land harder. He will land the bigger shots, and that'll lean, rounds his way. The other thing is I think that Hernandez thrives most when fights do go to the ground, but in this matchup, I think that he's going up against a fighter who has better wrestling than him, so I think Hyun Park will be the one who dictates if and when this fight does go and hit the mat. So I think Hyun Park kind of has all the advantages to win this one in any way possible, to be honest. And then Carlos Hernandez, potentially gritty decision, one where he weaponizes cardio a little bit, and you see, Hyun Park will kind of have to fade later on in the fight. That's the kind of scenario I would see for a Carlos Hernandez win, but it seems like there's multiple paths to victory for Park and only one real one for Hernandez. So I'm going to go with Hyun Park to win this one. Let's move on to the next matchup. In the next matchup, we got Denise Gomes versus Elise Reed. And while I don't agree with a lot of the betting lines for this week's card, this one, while Denise Gomes is minus 500, and while, she might not go out there and just absolutely smoke Elise Reed, get her out of there in the first 30 seconds, I think she will still look pretty dominant in this matchup. And I think if you play this matchup out 10 out of 10 times, it's really hard for me to see Elise Reed pick up more than maybe one out of those matchups. And the reason I say that is just because Elise Reed, I don't really see her posing enough of a threat anywhere in this fight, really. When it comes to Denise Gomes, she's going to be, small, compact with a lot of power, and she's just going to kind of walk you down and just bully you in the octagon. And I think that's going to be her game plan. And Elise Reed doesn't really have much to stop it here. She doesn't have the length or the reach to kind of, stay on the outside and really just use intense footwork to beat someone like Denise Gomes. Like I said, she doesn't have the grappling threat to really, tie up with Denise Gomes and kind of do something there, take her to the ground or something like that. Elise Reed is just going to kind of want a pretty striking fight here, and Denise Gomes is just not the one to come and give you that. So I think that, we also saw Elise Reed in her last fight against Jessica Penne. She got a little bit bullied, held up against the octagon, lost some control time there and stuff like that. And I think with someone like Denise Gomes, man, she's going to definitely do some stuff like that to you. I think she gets this one done by decision. Realistically, I think Elise Reed, solid. I don't really see her just getting knocked out randomly. Maybe, I don't know, Denise Gomes jumps Gilly or something and gets a guillotine on her. But outside of that, I think that, Gomes just comes out here, pressure striking, moving forward, and just gets a decision win against Elise Reed this weekend. I kind of get the odds. Let's move on to the next matchup. Up next, we got Luana Santos versus Tainara Lisboa, and I'm going to lean the underdog in this matchup. I'm going to go with Tainara Lisboa to beat Luana Santos, and I think, we saw Luana Santos in her last fight against Casey O'Neill really struggle to get the fight to the ground, and we saw that in that scenario where she couldn't get the fight to the ground, she did get a little bit lost on the feet, and Casey O'Neill was able to kind of, pull through when it comes to that. And I see Tainara Lisboa being able to, implement a very similar game plan. Tainara Lisboa, pretty good Muay Thai fighter, had a couple, kickboxing fights against Valentina Shevchenko in the past. And, she's got pretty decent takedown defense, I would say. I think that in this fight, she's going to keep it standing against Luana Santos. And, I think in the striking department, she's going to have Luana Santos covered for the most part. So I just think that Luana Santos, if she can't get the fight to the ground here, is going to struggle. And I don't like that for her. So give me the underdog here. I think that Lisboa keeps the fight standing. And in that scenario, I think that she can get this fight done on the scorecards. Up next, we got Connor Matheus versus Yadier DelValle. And I'm going to go with DelValle to beat Connor Matheus. Connor Matheus, man, he's 7-3 in professional MMA. Has not had the best run within the UFC. Lost to Dennis Bazookia by third round knockout. And to be honest, me personally, man, I think Dennis Bazookia is pretty trash. Maybe I'm just a hater, though. I just don't like Dennis Bazookia. And then after that, lost to Jose Delgado. Jose Delgado, with making his UFC debut, came in there and knocked Connor Matheus out in the first round. So Connor Matheus, man, his chin can be checked. Clearly has been in the last two fights. But at the end of the day, his back is up against the wall. He's probably fighting for his UFC career in this matchup. He's already been on the Contender Series twice. Initially, he lost to Francis Marshall. Then he came back and got a win on the Contender Series to then get into the UFC. So, if he gets booted out of the promotion here, his career in the UFC is basically done. So he is fighting for his UFC career here. And Yadier DelValle on the other side, making his UFC debut, coming off a really decent, dominating performance on the Contender Series. And, Connor Matheus, man, like I said, his chin can get checked. DelValle in that fight, yeah, he didn't get a finish on the Contender Series. But if anyone tells you that, DelValle doesn't have power, bro, you were not watching that fight. DelValle throwing nasty elbows, nasty knees to the liver, up against the fence against Antonio Montero. And I'm looking at Montero's not UFC, but I'm looking at Montero's MMA record. He's never been knocked out before. I think that's more of, his chin than DelValle not having power in those punches. So, DelValle came out there, got gritty, got up in Montero's face. If you do that to Connor Matheus, man, based on the last two fights, Connor Matheus is getting knocked the fuck out. So I'm going to go with DelValle to win this one. I think that he probably gets it done by knockout. The interesting thing here will be that, maybe Connor Matheus comes out and wrestles a lot or something like that. DelValle, I think he can, keep this fight standing. I think if it stays on the feet, like I said, DelValle is going to get aggressive. At some point in this fight, he's going to just pressure Connor Matheus to the point of no return. And, in that pressure, I think he has really good, Muay Thai in the clinch. Like I said, really strong elbows, really nasty elbows, knees to the liver, like he was throwing up against Montero. I think he gets Connor Matheus out of there. The only thing is, maybe Connor Matheus comes out, back against the wall. UFC career on the line. And then, at the same time, DelValle, 8-0, undefeated prospect coming off the Contender Series. They don't actually have the best record in 2025, as we know. So, a couple things you could maybe make narratives for on the Connor Matheus side. But outside of that, DelValle seems to be where the signal's pointing. That's going to be my pick. Let's move on to the next matchup. Next fight on the card, we got Jared Gordon versus Thiago Moises. And when I initially looked at this fight, I was like, okay, I'm going to probably go with Jared Gordon in this matchup. But then, I dove a little bit deeper, looked in a little bit more, and I'm actually, pretty confident on the Thiago Moises side here. So did a little bit of a flip before I even made my breakdown on this pick. But I'll tell you my thought process. Thiago Moises, I think he's a little bit low volume on the feet, but he does have pretty clean, pretty technical striking. And then I rewatched that Trey Ogden fight. And while, the volume is not the craziest out of Thiago Moises when it comes to the striking, I think he's very calculated and he's very accurate in his shots. And then you see Jared Gordon, and one thing I got to stop doing, I think a lot of us got to stop doing, is we got to stop putting respect on people's names from losses. And I mean, not in like a bad way, but we got to stop hyping people up based off a close loss. I think when it comes to UFC betting, a lot of people do that, me, myself included. Someone has a close fight with someone who's better than them. I'll give you like an example, like a Felipe Dos Santos versus Manel Kape. Felipe Dos Santos, pretty game with Manel Kape in his UFC debut, but Felipe Dos Santos, not all that good. So I think in scenarios like this with a Jared Gordon, where you see, he had the fight against Paddy Pimblett, which was obviously, a pretty controversial decision. We had the close fight with Nasrat Haqparast, which was also that split decision. I just don't see Thiago Moises, entering a firefight like Nasrat Haqparast does. Nasrat Haqparast, pretty game to sit in the pocket and just go crazy. That's what Jared Gordon wants to do. But I think what we're going to see in this fight is we're going to see Jared Gordon, walking forward quite a bit. We're going to see Thiago Moises just out footworking, out techniquing Jared Gordon on the feet. And then if this fight goes to the ground, we know that Thiago Moises is the better jiu-jitsu practitioner out of the two of these fighters. So I just think that, Thiago Moises, he's going to pick his shots. He's going to be more accurate. He will be lower volume, but Jared Gordon's just going to walk forward, and I think he's going to walk into a lot of shots of Thiago Moises. So give me Thiago Moises. I like it. The more I think about it, the more I like it. Let's move on to the next matchup. Next up, we got Matheus Camilo versus Gabe Green. Camilo is going to be making his UFC debut in this matchup. He won a contract to the UFC by beating Nabokov, who, if you guys remember, was the fighter that came up to Dana White in a press conference and asked for a shot. So that's Matheus Camilo. He beat that guy, and now he's making his UFC debut against Gabe Green. And this is a lightweight fight. I think something you guys will hear a lot this week is that Gabe Green, making his debut at lightweight, has fought at welterweight for his entire career, and he is like a big welterweight as well. So it's going to be interesting to see Gabe Green at lightweight. A lot of people might think that, it's kind of bad for him to come down and try to weight bully in this weight class, but I actually think it's going to be the other way around. I actually think that Gabe Green might look pretty good at lightweight. He's taken a while off, so I think that he's going to, have his reasons to come down to this weight class to be here. I definitely think that his body will be ready for lightweight. It's not like a quick change he's making. He hasn't fought since 2023 where he lost to Brian Battle. So he took a big break. I'm sure that there's a real solid reason for him to make a comeback at lightweight instead of welterweight. That's not an easy cut to take on for no reason. So I actually like the fact that he's coming down here at lightweight for Gabe Green. On the Matheus Camilo side, I mean, he showed pretty good, takedown defense in that Nabokov fight. Nabokov was obviously just trying to smother him the entire time, and he showed really good takedown defense. He showed really good leg kicks. He chewed up Nabokov's leg, and, he was dropping him with leg kicks over and over again, dominated that fight against Nabokov. And then Gabe Green, on the other hand, like I said, hasn't fought for a couple years, coming off back-to-back losses, but to really high-level comp in Brian Battle and Ian Gary. So Gabe Green, bigger fighter, has fought the better people, has more experience. And this is one of those matchups where someone like Camilo, I just think that he looked like he had really clean striking in that Nabokov fight, but Gabe Green's not going to come out here and give a shit about it. I think Gabe Green's going to make this fight super dirty, super messy. He's got the experience to kind of back that as well. And I just don't know if Camilo's going to, be up for it under that pressure. So I think this is a pretty tough debut for someone like a Matheus Camilo. I like the fact that, Gabe Green also is on like plus money here. So I see the value being on Gabe Green. He's the bigger fighter. He has better experience. And what I see is primarily going to be a striking match. I think that Gabe Green's going to have a ton more firepower coming towards Camilo. So Camilo might be cleaner. He might look a little bit slicker, but I think Gabe Green can come in here and just be like, nah, fuck that. Get in his face and just make this a dogfight and win. So I like that, especially on the underdog side. So I'm going to take Gabe Green. Let's move on to the next matchup. Next fight up, we got Julian Erosa versus Melquizael Costa. And I'm going to go with Costa to win this matchup. And I think it's just because he has a few more paths to victory than a Julian Erosa here. And I'm going to break him down for you. So Julian Erosa, man, I mean, good striker, high volume, very creative. We know who Julian Erosa is at this point. We have Melquizael Costa, 28 years old, really active, surging right now. I think he's getting better every single fight. And, he's got pretty accurate, pretty well-timed striking. The one thing is he is obviously going to be lower volume than Julian Erosa, but it's really hard to, out-volume someone like Julian Erosa. So on the Erosa side, here's a couple paths to victory I could potentially see. a decision where a lot of this fight stays on the feet and Erosa just outworks a Melquizael Costa. That's one path. I think it's fairly unlikely for that to happen, though. I don't see Costa as someone to just sit there and let the fight slip away that way. And then the other thing is I can see Costa going to mix in some grappling in this fight, and I can see Julian Erosa jumping Gilly or something like that. So something like that could potentially, always get in the way of a win for Costa here. But outside of those, I think that for Costa, he's got the power to knock someone like Julian Erosa out. Julian Erosa has been knocked out multiple times in his career. I think like 7 times in his career, Erosa's been knocked out. And with Costa striking, with how accurate it is, how well timed it is, I think that Costa does have the tools to knock out Julian Erosa here. I also think Costa has a good enough submission game to get Julian Erosa to the ground and get him out of here by submission. And I think that he can also win this fight by decision. So I see that, Costa can win this fight in tons of different ways. If he does win by decision, I think it's because he's going to land the harder shots, have the bigger moments. Like I said, he can knock out or submit Erosa. So all the finishing upside is on the Costa side in this matchup. Julian Erosa, obviously, live for a knockout, live for a random Gilly, but I find those a little bit more unlikely than the Costa paths to victory. So I'm going to go with Melquizael Costa to win this fight. Let's move on to the next matchup. Up next, we got Nursultan Ruziboev versus Dustin Stoltzfus. I'm going to go with Ruziboev to beat Stoltzfus in this matchup. I think that Ruziboev has really good stand-up. He can definitely catch a Dustin Stoltzfus, especially with how tall he's going to be standing. He's going to be 6'5" to Stoltzfus 6 foot tall here. And I just think that Ruziboev, very accurate, very technical, and also has a good amount of power. That being said, I think that there is some risk on the Ruziboev side if Stoltzfus comes in and just wrestles a lot, which I think he will try to. Not saying that Ruziboev has terrible takedown defense, but it hasn't really been tested too much. The one time it was tested was against Joaquin Buckley, and Buckley was taking him down. That is interesting, though, because you can see Buckley's takedowns in that matchup. Ruziboev was just throwing wild knees and stuff like that at Buckley, and that was much more of a dogfight. I think that in this fight, Ruziboev will definitely be pulling away on the feet a lot, unlike the Buckley fight, in which case I don't see him being as wild. I don't see him, letting it go as much, turning it into a dogfight, because that only favors Dustin Stoltzfus. So I think Stoltzfus will try to wrestle. If he does get Ruziboev to the ground, I think that Stoltzfus can do some good work, win some minutes, and even do some damage to Ruziboev if he's on top. But I think as long as Ruziboev keeps his fight standing long enough, he does have the ability, and he will find the knockout on Stoltzfus. So I'm going to pick Ruziboev. I think he gets it done outside of a little bit of risk on the wrestling side. I think that Ruziboev should be good to go here. Let's move on to the next matchup. Next fight up on the card, we got Sodiq Yusuff versus Mairon Santos, and I'm going to go ahead and pick Mairon Santos to get this one done. I think he could potentially knock out Sodiq Yusuff. I also think, more likely he wins this one by decision. But Sodiq Yusuff, coming into this fight, he is going to be obviously the more experienced fighter. That's going to be something going for him here. His strength of schedule has been better. He's coming off a loss to Diego Lopez, and we all know how good Diego Lopez is. Prior to that, he lost to Edson Barbosa. Edson Barbosa, obviously a legend of the game. And then before that, 2 wins in a row, and then prior to that, a loss to Arnold Allen. So his losses clearly really high-level fighters. So strength of schedule-wise, Sodiq Yusuff, there is something to be worried about there. There is some concern there. Mairon Santos, 15-1, super hyped-up prospect, but he did lose a ton of steam when it comes to his hype after his last fight against Francis Marshall, where he won by split decision. But a lot of people, thought that Francis Marshall did enough to win that fight, me included. Now, that being said, Mairon Santos so far has only struggled against people that have, taken him down, mixed in that wrestling against him. And Sodiq Yusuff, I don't think is the person to come in and do that. Sodiq Yusuff has, just maybe 1 or 2 takedowns in his entire UFC career, and he's been in the UFC for a while, since 2018. So Sodiq Yusuff is not coming in here with a very, well-rounded game plan. He's going to also just come out here and strike with Mairon Santos. And when it comes to that, Mairon Santos, great defense on the feet as well. He moves around really well. His footwork, I think, is going to carry him in this fight. I think he's just going to be able to land more. Volume-wise, both these guys are around the same, so it's not like Sodiq Yusuff is throwing a ton more volume than Mairon Santos, so we got to worry about, Santos just not doing enough but being cleaner. Santos will throw more. He's going to move much better. His defense is going to be way better, and I don't see this fight hitting the ground. So I'm going to go with Mairon Santos here. I know he lost a little bit of hype, and it's valid if Mairon Santos does fight someone with that wrestling prowess. He will lose, or at least, that's part of his game he's got to tighten up. But for now, against Sodiq Yusuff, I understand the strength of schedule and the experience, but I'm going to have to go with Mairon Santos. Let's move on to the next matchup. Next up in the co-main event, we got Paul Craig versus Rodolfo Bellato, and I'm going to have to go with Rodolfo Bellato to beat Paul Craig. And I kind of understand the line. The line is a little bit wide, but it's a regular Paul Craig fight where if he does pull it off, and you're on his side, you have the balls to take the Paul Craig side, you get paid out. But me in this matchup, man, I think every sign points to Bellato. Paul Craig, we know Paul Craig, high-level jiu-jitsu. We know that's going to be his biggest threat to pull off a random sub here. And to be honest, if it happens at this point, who's really even going to be surprised if Paul Craig can pull that off on Bellato? No one's going to really be that surprised. It'll be cool to see, though. But as a pick, everything kind of leans on the Bellato side. I see that, Paul Craig going to be the weaker striker in this one. I think Bellato has the cleaner striking. Paul Craig also has the worst durability. Bellato has actually a pretty good chin, shown in that Jimmy Crute fight, which on the other side, Paul Craig doesn't have the best chin at all. Paul Craig can, get finished. Both these guys also have the power to knock each other out. So both these guys have power. Bellato with a much better chin than Paul Craig. On top of that, I think, the wrestling, both these guys don't really have the best wrestling at all. I think if the fight does go to the ground, it'll be like a sloppy, clinch type trip takedown where we don't even know who's going to end up on top. For all we know, either of them can end up on top in that scenario. So I don't really see this fight going to the ground. At least I don't see Bellato taking Paul Craig to the ground. I think Bellato will settle in, understand that he can just outstrike this guy, understand that he has the better durability on the feet as well, and, will probably eventually knock Paul Craig out because Bellato does have big power. So I'm going to go with Bellato to win this matchup. I think it's pretty straightforward. Like I said, keep it on the feet. And yeah, let's move on to the next matchup. And in this week's main event, we got Gilbert Burns versus Michael Morales. And I really wanted to pick Gilbert Burns, especially after I looked at the betting line. I wanted a reason to pick Gilbert Burns here, but I'm going to go and pick Michael Morales. There's really no sign that points to Gilbert Burns winning this fight. I think that, Gilbert Burns doesn't have good enough wrestling to kind of go out there and take a Michael Morales down consistently, hold a Michael Morales down consistently. A Morales that's going to be, 6 foot tall, 79 inches of reach, 8-inch reach advantage on Gilbert Burns as well. So Michael Morales is going to be younger than him, bigger than him, faster than him, more explosive than him, carry more power, and who's also the better striker in the matchup. Yeah, it makes no sense. Gilbert Burns, if he does somehow swing this fight to the ground, maybe he can slip in and work in a submission somehow. I think that's probably his only real route to victory here, but highly unlikely. So I guess I do understand the betting line. I mean, at minus 800, Michael Morales is fairly unplayable in my opinion. It's also a 5-round fight, so there's a potential of, maybe someone gassing out, some weird stuff happening like that. But Gilbert Burns doesn't really weaponize cardio. It's not really something in his repertoire to do, so I don't really see him, kind of doing that as well. If the pace of this fight is super high, I think Burns will gas out just as much as Morales, if not more, at 38 years old. So give me Michael Morales, man. Everything points towards him. I think he gets Burns out of there. I think he knocks him out. It's pretty sad the way they're doing Gilbert Burns, to be honest, on his way out of here, but it is what it is. I'm going to go with Morales. And yeah, that does it for the picks and predictions for UFC Vegas 106. Thank you guys for tuning into this week's picks and predictions for UFC Vegas 106. I hope everyone enjoyed the breakdowns. If you like what you heard, like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. We really appreciate your support early on. Also, join our Discord community if that's something you guys want to do. It's just a community where you can come, kick up, and talk UFC, MMA bets, anything you want. So join the Discord. That is completely free. If you also want to support us a bit further, check out kopicks.win, where we launch our premium package every single week. You can see the spots that we really like, the spots that we're betting on, where we're putting our money down, what books we're putting it on, how many units we're putting on it, everything like that, all that good stuff. We're doing really well all time. Had a couple cold weeks in the last few weeks, but that's just the way the game goes. It's a game of runs. And, all that means is that we're due at some point. So check out kopicks.win. For $20 a month, you can access our premium bets. That really helps support the channel. And yeah, good luck to everyone this week. I'll see you guys next week.